Hi everyone, my name is Gina and I'm here with John Finnegan today, who's going to help us learn a little bit about ways to decrease our ecological footprint and provide some insight into environmental news. So John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Gina. Thank you so much for having me on the call. Well, first of all, as Gina said, I'm John Finnegan. And like Gina, I have a very similar passion to protecting and saving the environment. Basically, a little background on myself. I worked at Bristol Myers Squibb for about 26 years in various, financial and marketing and sales roles. One of my favorite roles there was being on the company Green Team, which involved a lot of activities, Earth Day, speaking at Lunch and Learn, so and so. So that was a really enjoyable part of my time at Bristol Myers Squibb. I'm currently in the process of launching a company called Earth Savings, LLC. We'll get into that in a little bit, but basically it's a company on teaching people how to live more sustainable.
Great. And yeah, as you said, we're going to go a little bit into your Earth Savings LLC. So what do you consider the key factor to achieving your vision of your LLC?
Well, basically, we try to teach people how to live a more sustainable life, focusing on not only the environmental and health benefits, but the financial benefits. The name Earth Savings has really two meanings. Number one, we're saving the earth, but then Earth Savings, because of the financial implications of living a green life, the Earth Savings money, because you do save money and people perk up. They listen when you talk about the money.
It's definitely true, definitely true. So how or when did you develop your passion for environmental sustainability or for your passion for your vision for your LLC?
Sure. Well, the passion for the environment, I would go back to 2006 at my wife's company picnic. I met a gentleman there and he told me he had solar panels. And we talked about solar panels for a long time. And he was enthusiastic, which was great. And we talked about the environmental benefits, wonderful. When he started talking about the financial savings that he and his wife had, he got extra enthused, and so did I. So I would love here to sit and say, ooh, I love the planet more than anything, and I do. But when you know a tangible benefit of saving money today in your wallet, that's especially good.
Yeah, you're right. Very true. And so over the course of my webinar, I talk about some tips and tricks that everyday people could do to help reduce waste in the ocean and stuff. So what are some ways that you conserve resources in your own home?
Sure. Well, there's a number of ways, and tell me if I'm going on too long here for the audience. The three areas I really do things in my home are number one, transportation. Number two, energy efficiency. And number three, consumption. Those are really three big buckets that we look at in my house and society as a whole should look at. In terms of transportation, my wife and I bought an electric car a few years ago, a Nissan Leaf. And the Leaf is a great car. It's a 100% electric car. It's not a hybrid. So you basically powered it up by plugging it in your garage, which is really nice. So the advantages of an electric car are numerous. First of all, there's no greenhouse gases coming from my tailpipe at all. In fact, I have no tailpipe. So that's an advantage. The second thing is, the financial savings are, if you own a gas-powered car, think of all the gas expenses, all of the maintenance expenses, oil changes, air filter changes, spark plugs, transmission fluid. The list is very long. With an electric car, you have nothing except your insurance, putting air in your tires, and going to Nissan once a year for them to check my battery to make sure it's good. That's it. So you save a lot of money. There's the environmental benefit. And the only thing I'll say about an electric car that concerns people is people are afraid they're going to run out of a battery charge when they're on the road. Okay. Two things I'll answer that with. Number one, the batteries are getting much better with their range. My first Nissan Leaf was only 100 miles. This one is about 150. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
And number two, the charging stations, initially there weren't many of them. Now they're all over the place and only increasing.
Mm-hmm. I see the ones, there's ones right near Barnes and Noble. I know I always pass them and wish I could go up there and
Yes.
charge my car real quick.
Yes, yes. So that's great, and that makes people feel better. One other thing too, if you're not in the market for an electric car, because not everybody is, if you're a student, a college student, there's other things you can do that are even better than an electric car, or any car for that matter. Number one, mass transportation. That's always a good option. Number two, biking. Number three, walking. Many times you could take a 10-minute walk instead of getting in your car. And finally, there's ride sharing, and other ways. In the case of biking or walking, there's the added benefit of the health benefit. So there's many reasons. So people, while electric is good, there's other options as well. So that's kind of my energy efficiency thing. The other things in my house too that are energy efficient, well, that's more the transportation. Let's just stop at that for now. The second part of what we do in my house is more energy efficient. We do about 5 big things. The first one is having solar panels. We also use our programmable thermostat. We have these things called smart strips where you plug everything into it. And at night, when you turn off one thing, they all go off. They're not trickling with electricity at night. So it really shuts down the power. We utilize ceiling fans as well. That helps you keep your air conditioning at a lower level and have the ceiling fan. And then a big thing is the LED lighting. A lot of people like the CFL bulbs, but the problem with them is they have mercury inside of them. So if you ever break a bulb and now you have microscopic mercury in your house, it's very difficult to clean up and not the healthiest thing. So a lot of the experts and a lot of the technology is heading towards these LED lights, which are great. They use only a fraction of the energy that an incandescent bulb would use.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know, going back to your transportation, I know I'm going to college next year and I'm definitely not planning on bringing a car, but the campus is pretty big. So doing things like getting a bike, walking around, or they have a bus system there too. It's very popular.
Absolutely.
So in general, how do you hold yourself accountable when you're making these changes when it comes to reducing waste and developing conservative habits?
Well, I think 3 real areas. I think number 1, consistency. Number 2, time management. And number 3, education. When I say consistency, it's really important to set monthly goals. I think you're going to touch on that in your presentation. If you don't set goals, you don't achieve anything. You really don't. You need to set those goals. I'm a believer in making a list of what you need to do. Don't make it crazy. Make a realistic list. Number 2, time management. You don't hear that a lot with environmental speakers, but it's very important because if you just make a list of things and you don't put it in your calendar, most of the time it's not going to get done. A to-do list with good intentions is wonderful, but unless you put time on your calendar, what I do is every month I have a little piece of time and I say monthly green activities. So I try to challenge myself each month and say, what can I do differently this month in my house? And that's a reminder in my calendar. So that's helpful. Number 3, education. If you want to be held accountable, you need to raise your knowledge. Just reading the local newspapers and the magazines don't cut it. There's a website called Environmental Health News. The website is ehn.org. I encourage everybody who's passionate about the environment to go sign up for that. They have a daily email. And what it does is it takes publications, articles from top publications, newspapers, magazines around the globe, and it sends you a daily email. Now, I'll be honest, I don't read that whole thing every day, but I look through the titles and see what catches my interest, and I'll read that. So Michael Brune, the prior head of the Sierra Club, he was asked this question years ago: how do you stay up on all the environmental news? This was his answer.
Oh, great.
So it's really, I highly suggest people try that.
Yeah, and I can put that at the end of my series. I hope to put a list of resources. I can definitely include that on there for anyone who's interested.
That's
and
awesome.
So I know you touched on a little bit the financial benefits and even like the health benefits of walking and biking. Could you touch on some other benefits from developing like green habits and stuff like that?
Sure. I think the big things are you have the environmental, you have the health, but also something it's been up in the news a lot lately is a lot of what's happening globally with the environment is affecting the poor and the impoverished more. Okay, what you see is coal-fired power plants being put in poor neighborhoods. And the reason for that is the wealthy neighborhoods won't allow it. All right. So that's not something people like to discuss. You see trash piles, landfills put next to poor neighborhoods. And what happens? Those landfills generate methane gas as the food decomposes. So the list, we could have a 2-hour seminar or webinar just on the benefits. And it depends on what you're talking about. Each thing, whether it's solar panels, an electric car, a reusable water bottle, they all have their pros and cons. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it did, definitely. Thank you. And so we'll start to wrap it up here. I know a lot of concern, especially with youth, is that they think that, oh, if I take this little action, if I use a reusable water bottle, I'm like the only person doing it. Is it really going to make that big of a difference? So when someone questions you, like the if or how their impact will address such a global issue, how do you respond?
Well, I think I love to answer the if question with a quote from Margaret Mead. She's an anthropologist, and she said, "Don't ever think that a small group of citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And when I started my environmental life, quote unquote, with the solar panels many years ago, that was the first thing I did. But when I saw the health, financial, environmental benefits, that excited me to do more. And now, 14 years later, the list is long of what we do in my house. We're not patting ourselves on the back, but you feel good about doing it and you see the benefits, the many benefits. Now, as far as how do you respond in terms of how it will be impacting, I think it's kind of a grassroots approach. You really need to go person to person. If you're posting on social media, that's wonderful. If you're sending an email, that's wonderful. But when you're face to face with someone and you see their passion, you hear their voice, you show them your electric bill with a $0 on it versus 200 the prior month, that makes a bigger difference. And that person who starts with that one little thing, I would encourage them to make something else, a change in their life next month. Make it 2 little things. And before long, you get that momentum going.
Yeah, perfect. And thank you so much for coming on. I think that wraps everything up for us. I'm sure everyone who's watching learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you, Gina. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.